Then when we get into the fall, the outlook, we're going to go over the demand, talk about some historical tie flows, what you expect, go over some transmission outages we're watching, specifically an HQ outage, talk generation, some more gas retirements, and then we'll give you a brief summary. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Armand, who's going to take you through the summer 2014 recap.
All right. Thank you, Stefan. So hello, everybody. This is Armand. So starting with weather temperatures first, we're looking at the June, July, and August of last summer here. We can see June was slightly above average, up to 2 degrees, and then temperatures start to fall down as July and August, August being the lowest. These 3 months once averaged, it makes up for a lower than average summer, and we're going to see in the next slide that how it's reflected on prices and demand. And precipitation, we can see northern and eastern tips of New York got more rain than expected, but majority of the state was as expected, as average. So there's nothing rain-wise that anything impacted demand or prices. So here are historical prices for the last 4 years. The most important thing to see here is you see Zone A on the top and G in the bottom. If you look at June, it is more expensive or comparable to the last 4 years. And another thing to see here is that Zone A and G spread in the June of 2014 is about $0.25 $1. That obviously is because Zone A was congested. That's due to some Niagara Packard 115 kV outages that was imported in June. And also, as we've seen in the weather in the last slide, June was slightly warmer. So that's why June is more expensive. And if you look at July and August, it is clearly a lot more cheaper. And demand-wise, it's the same thing. You can see June being more comparable to the previous 4 years, whereas July and August really load is going down a lot. This is the same data, just in a graph form, in case you'd like to see it that way. And looking at the gas prices, again, this is just the data for the past 4 years of Z2 and Z6. The important thing to see here is that Z6 in August 2014 is $2.50 all the way to the right of the slide. You'll see it. It is the cheapest in the last 4 years, and we can see the price of June, July, August going down. Another bearish factor, and also it goes hand in hand with demand. As demand decreased, gas prices reflected that too. And this was also for summer, and I'm going to hand it back to Stefan for the fallout.
Thank you. All right, so right off the bat here, we have the weather expectations. We do have some El Nino conditions developing. So looking out at October, oh, also I should have mentioned, we're not going to cover September as we're pretty well into it. So this will just be October and November. So starting off with October, we are expecting some above normal temperatures pretty much all across the East Coast. We'll hit the New York City, Long Island out there in New York. So that's going to keep demand very low, very comfortable temperatures, you know, very, very low heating load, not a lot of cooling load. It should be very, very comfortable fall. Getting into November, again, we're going to have pretty much the entire state above normal as we have pretty much the entire northern part of America is expected to see some slightly above average temperatures. But once again, this is from a fall perspective. So above average temperatures will translate to very, very weak demand. Here's some historical information just over the last 3 years, September, October, November. So as you can see, last October and November, we did have slightly stronger than average demand. That is not expected for this year. So once again, we are expecting some very comfortable above average temperatures. One note for September, as of right now, you know, we are sitting at about 21 gigs on peak average. That was because of a heat wave that did roll through early this month. Actually, was the peak low day this year hit in early September. So that's going to skew it a little bit. But for October and November, again, we are expecting things to come in fairly bearish. Moving on now, we're going to take a look at the historical tie lines, what we can expect for import-exports over the next 2 months. So here we have the October comparison. One thing to notice here is the big increase in IMO from 2012 on to 2013. That has to do with the retirement of Dunkirk, so that was a loss of basically base load out there in Zone A, as well as some changes on Ontario's side, just them becoming a little more efficient, flowing some more power in. Basic story there is that we do expect those strong flows to continue into this upcoming October. Taking a look out at November, 2 big changes to talk about there. First of all, we start exporting out to New England. That's to be expected as summer conditions begin to set in. Things start to cool down a little bit. We get to send some more out to New England just in anticipation of the winter. One other thing I really want to point out here is if you look at PJM, there was a big drop-off going from 2012 into 2013. Now this data is slightly skewed as there was an outage at Branchburg-Ramapo, the big PAR line, the largest PAR line that makes up that PJM interface. So with that back, we should get quite a decent increase in PJM flows from a year-over-year perspective. All right, now taking a look at upcoming transmission outages, I want to emphasize this is not at all an exhaustive list. These are just the important ones that I've picked out. They are organized by days on outage, so by length, by duration. That can be found in the most right category. So starting off just with the D rates, we do have a Central East D rate, that one at the bottom. I do expect that to drive some congestion. Upside F through K, pretty similar to what we've been seeing over the last few days. Another important one to be looking at is the Long Mountain to Pleasant Valley. That is going to derate the New England interface there all the way down to 500. Now, typically we wouldn't expect to be importing very much from New England around this time of year, but it is important to note that it will be derated as well as will derate the 1385 cable, which again is some upside to Zone K. Another important note about this is that this is the import limit. The export limit is only derated by about 300. So again, unlikely that that will drive too much congestion. We do have some Beck to Niagara outages, so that will derate some of those Ontario imports. However, again, we do expect them to be strong while the interface is not derated. And then Athens, Pleasant Valley, 13-day outage there. That will likely drive some Pleasant Valley area congestion. We saw that quite a bit this summer. So just some outages to be watching. Down here at the bottom, we have just line outages. Now these aren't associated with any sort of interface, so they don't show up as a D rate. But the most important one, I think probably the most influential line outage, with the exception of an HQ outage I'll talk about shortly, are these Niagara-Packard 115 lines. They will be down the 29th all the way through December 31st, so it's a 93-day outage. We've seen these lines come in and out for about a year now, and they drive, or they can be, quite a serious Zone A congestion driver. So while these lines are on outage, I do expect quite a bit of volatility out of Zone A. We also have some South Ripley to Dunkirk and Erie to South Ripley. Now these lines are much less impactful, only going to be down for about 18 days. But they are tie lines between PJM, and another big driver of that Zone A congestion is the amount of PJM imports coming in over the AC, especially on the 230 system. So as those go in and out, we have seen it drive and alleviate some Zone A congestion. So now we're going to go on to what is truly the most impactful thing that we are looking at for this fall. It is a Chattagua-Massena, the large HQ-AC tie, will be coming down for a scheduled outage of about 22 days from 10/4 through 10/26. So this is going to bring down all of the imports over the HQ-AC cedars, and the EX should still be going. But just to give a little bit of perspective, so far this month, averaging on-peak average of about 1,200 megawatts of imports on a daily basis coming in from HQ. So the loss of this HQ line is the equivalent of losing about a gig of baseload to New York. It does go and it does tie directly in there to the Marcy bus. So it will increase heat rates pretty much across the board for New York. It will increase the reference price. And so just some expectation for what's going to happen with the flows and some congestion risk. On the graph on the bottom left there, I did choose a similar outage. It's actually the exact same line going on outage back in 2012 through October. And so the key thing to see here is what happens to the Dissinger East versus Central East flows. Now, with the loss of the baseload, it's to be expected that the majority of the, we'll see increased flows coming out of Zone A and imports coming in through the east of the state to make up for the loss of the flows coming in from the north. So we can see that here in the increase in Dissinger East flows. Also, another important note is typically we see Central East binding long before Dissinger East does. One of the reasons is that it has the addition of the HQ flows coming over that interface. So with the loss of HQ, that does alleviate quite a bit of flows over the Central East, and it does increase the risk of Dissinger East being the first to bind, which sends quite a bit of downside price to Zone A. So downside Zone A is a risk. Now, if there are no outages that derate the Dissinger East interface, I would not be expecting it, but if any sort of line outage were to come up that were to derate it just a few hundred megawatts, that would seriously increase the risk of some downside Zone A congestion, both day ahead and real time. But if we look at it here, we see that Messina to Marcy is also going to be down throughout this entire outage, and that is going to derate the Central East interface by about 660 megs there. So overall, I do expect Central East to continue to be the dominant constraint and to help mitigate most of the risk of Dissinger East coming down, once again, assuming Dissinger East does not become derated. Another important thing to think about here is what are the implications for Zone A congestion, upside Zone A specifically, sorry. Overall, it should be bullish upside Zone A congestion as I said previously, the generators in Zone A, imports coming in from IMO will likely increase in response to the loss of this baseload. So that'll put more strain on Niagara, on that 230 kV system out there, and we'll likely see some continued volatility in Zone A, probably throughout all of the fall here, but most likely it'll be the most extreme while this HQ is on outage. Also keep in mind that this outage will correlate with the previous Zone A Niagara Packard outage that I listed previously that will be out for 93 days. Moving on to generation outage and some upcoming gas constraints. So first of all, just looking at the forecasted gen outages provided by NYISO through October, just as we enter outage season, we can expect these planned outages to increase. So you can see here the numbers they're providing all the way through October, getting fairly strong. But once again, with the very weak load forecasted, it's unlikely that it will be too much of an upside factor with these generators on outage, just slightly stronger heat rates. We also have a TGP constraint coming up. This should be similar to what we've seen the last couple of days. Now, the constraint will be slightly less. It will be allowing more flows over the TGP line, but we have seen how that increase in TGP also brought up the Z2 prices. Also, there are some units in New York that do price off that TGP. So it will have an impact to New York. Also, we can expect to send some more to New England as their gas prices come up. And so those, that is 10.20 through 11.5 is the main heat rate of the TGP. Coming on to retirements, the biggest news is that the planned Selkirk retirement, that has been canceled as of 9/3. I think they were having some issues with the lease out there. They got something figured out, and that unit is now expected to continue to run at full capacity. However, there is one unit coming down, a jet out there at Ravenswood 3.3, 42 capacity out there in Zone J. Doesn't have a very high capacity factor, not expected to have any sort of substantial impact on the grid, and that will be going out October 31st. So in summary, for fall 2014, from a demand perspective, we are looking at very, very weak demand, lower than the last few years, very warm temperatures, low volatility from a demand perspective. Congestion, continued Zone A volatility. the only downside risk would be present with that HQ, but again, I believe that we would need to see a further derate on the Dissinger East interface to get much downside. The majority of it will be upside with all the line work going on in Zone A, also the increased output from Niagara to as a reaction to the loss of the HQ flows. And imports and flows, once again, the loss of the HQ AC tie will be the largest increased flows over Dissinger East, larger than Central East. And that is going to do it for the 2014 fall outlook. I'll give it a few minutes. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and type them in the box there, and I'll get to them, and I'll be back in a few minutes. Thanks. Bye. So we've got two questions here. The first is about the return of Dan's camera. We have no new information about the return of Dan's camera. I do not believe it will be in for the remainder of 2014. The other question was about the effect of increased IMO imports on Zone A congestion, specifically to IMO increasing as a response to HQ going down. So in terms of upside congestion, typically when IMO flows come in strong, it comes in over the 345 kV system, and that does drive quite a bit of upside Zone A congestion. So increased IMO is a bullish upside for the Niagara, Packard, Huntley, Sawyer, that type of upside Zone A congestion. However, again, if Dissinger East is derated, those flows coming in from IMO go directly over that Dissinger East interface. So in the event of a Dissinger East derate, it would actually be a very bearish Zone A congestion factor. So you'll have to closely be watching the flows over that interface to know what the effect will be. But typically, I do note it as a upside Zone A congestion risk. And that is going to go ahead and do it. So once again, you will